It was a bright morning when the billionaire stepped out of his black car and walked across the new construction site. Workers moved around, carrying materials, wearing helmets and uniforms. The man was tall, serious, and dressed in a dark suit. His name was Mr. Daniels. Everyone recognized him from a distance. People usually avoided direct eye contact with him. He was known as a strict man who didn't smile often, but inside, behind that powerful face, was a father who had carried a wound for 10 long years. 10 years ago, his little daughter disappeared without a trace. No one ever found her. Every birthday after that felt empty. Every sound of children laughing in the park reminded him of her voice. He had searched across states, hired private investigators, spent millions, and yet there was nothing. Her picture still stood in his office. He saw it every day before starting work. People saw him as a billionaire, but he only saw himself as a father who failed to protect his child. That day, he came to the construction site for a surprise visit. He walked with 2 assistants and a security guard. He wanted to check the progress of the building. As he moved past the cafeteria, something made him stop. At first, he didn't know why. Then his eyes fell on a young woman standing near the wall with a mop and bucket. She was wearing a plain uniform and wiping the floor. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Her face looked so familiar. It wasn't just a small similarity, Mike, it was something deeper. Her eyes were warm, shaped just like his daughter's. She had the same small birthmark under her chin. Even the way she tilted her head when someone spoke was exactly like how his daughter used to do it as a child. His heart began to beat faster. His steps became unsteady. His assistant whispered something to him, but he didn't hear. All the noise of the workers disappeared. He could only see her face. She looked up and noticed the man staring at her. She froze, unsure why a powerful man like him was looking at her like that. She felt confused and a little nervous. Mr. Daniels slowly walked closer. The security guard followed but stayed back. He stopped just a few steps away from her. She lowered her eyes, holding the mop tighter. She had no idea what was going on. She was just doing her job, like she did every day. She had grown up moving from one foster home to another. Life had never been easy. Work gave her a little stability, and that was all she had. "Your name," Mr. Daniels whispered softly, almost to himself. She answered politely, telling him her name. That name hit him like a wave. It wasn't his daughter's name, but something about it felt like a clue. He repeated it slowly under his breath. He wanted to ask more questions, but he stopped himself. He didn't want to scare her. He noticed every small detail, the way she smiled nervously, the scar near her wrist, the soft tone of her voice. His daughter used to speak gently like that too. He remembered holding that little girl in his arms when she was just 2 years old. He remembered how she used to laugh when he lifted her up. He remembered her favorite bedtime song. The young woman shifted a little, uncomfortable with the silence. Finally, he forced himself to smile politely and thanked her for her work. She nodded, unsure what to say. As he walked away, he felt something burning in his chest. It wasn't pain exactly. It was something more complicated. It was hope mixed with fear. Inside his car, his assistant began talking about construction costs, but he didn't listen. His mind was somewhere else. He couldn't shake off her face. It was like looking into the past. That same soft expression, that same chin, that same spark in the eyes. He had seen many faces over the years, people who reminded him of his daughter for a second. But this was different. This was too close. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat in his dark living room with an old photo album. He opened the page with his daughter's picture at age 2. Then another picture when she was 3. He stared at those small features, her nose, her smile, that tiny mark under her chin. The young woman at the site looked exactly like her grown-up version. His hands shook slightly as he traced the photo with his fingers. He whispered to himself, "It can't be. It can't be her. Or what if it is?" Memories flooded back, the night she vanished, the endless search, the unanswered questions. Over time, people told him to move on, but he never truly did. Every night he silently hoped for a miracle. That miracle might have just looked him in the eye today. The next morning, he asked his assistant to give him the name of every worker in the cafeteria. His assistant raised an eyebrow, confused. Mr. Daniels gave no explanation. He didn't want anyone to know yet. He wanted to find the truth quietly. He sat alone in his office after everyone left. Her name was on the list. He said it out loud again. Something inside him told him this was not an ordinary moment. Something big was about to be revealed. Far away, the young woman continued her day as usual, unaware of the storm she had stirred in a man's heart. She had no idea why the billionaire looked at her like he knew her. She only knew that for the first time in a long time, someone had really looked at her, not just walked past her like she didn't exist. That quiet meeting, only a few seconds long, was about to change both of their lives forever. He didn't know what the truth would bring. She didn't know what kind of past was about to knock on her door, but something deep inside both of them had already shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning started quietly, but Mr. Daniels' heart wasn't quiet at all. He had spent the night replaying her face in his mind again and again. He couldn't focus on anything else. His company was worth billions, but for the first time in a long time, business didn't matter to him. All that mattered was the strange feeling he got when he looked at that young woman. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was something real. It felt like a door from the past had suddenly opened after 10 long years. Without telling anyone the full reason, he called his private investigator. This was the same man he had hired years ago when his daughter disappeared. His voice was calm but serious. He gave the woman's full name, her work ID, and asked the investigator to quietly find everything about her. Where she came from, where she lived, who raised her. He didn't want her to know, not yet. He needed the truth first. The investigator got to work immediately. Mr. Daniels waited in silence in his office. Every tick of the clock felt longer than a minute. His hands stayed folded on the table, but his mind was far away. He remembered the night of the disappearance. He remembered his little girl wearing a yellow dress running around the house. Then she was gone, just like that. No one could explain how. Over the years, people gave up hope. But he never did. In the afternoon, the investigator called. His voice carried both surprise and something else, something heavy. The young woman had no parents listed. She had entered the foster system as a small child with no record of where she came from. There were strange gaps in her early years. No clear hospital records, no family contacts. She had been moved from one home to another for most of her childhood. Mr. Daniels felt his chest tighten as he listened. He asked the investigator to dig deeper. Within a few hours, more details came in. There was a hospital file from the same month his daughter disappeared. A baby with no name had been placed in foster care after being found abandoned. The age, the time, even the location, it all matched too closely to be ignored. His hands trembled as he read the file. He had spent years looking for her in the wrong places. And all this time, she had grown up as a stranger in a world that never told her who she truly was. That evening, he sat alone in the back seat of his car, watching the sun go down. He whispered to himself, "This can't be a coincidence. This has to be her." The next step was something he had never imagined he would have to do. He arranged a private DNA test. Quietly, carefully, he got a sample of her cup from the cafeteria with the help of security. It felt strange to do something like this, but he wasn't ready to face her until he knew for sure. He told no one about his plan except the investigator. 2 days later, the test result arrived. Mr. Daniels opened the envelope with shaking hands. His heart was racing. He sat in his office, the room quiet except for the soft sound of the wind outside. His eyes moved slowly down the page, and then he saw it. 99% match. He leaned back in his chair. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. A sound escaped his throat. Not a cry, not a laugh, just a quiet sound of disbelief. All the years of searching, hoping, hurting, and now the truth was on a single piece of paper. She wasn't just someone who looked like his daughter. She was his daughter. His lost child was alive, and she had grown up working as a cleaner in his own company. His mind filled with everything he had missed. Her first steps, her first words, her first day at school, birthdays, laughter, tears. All those moments had happened without him. He had spent 10 years with wealth, power, and everything the world could offer, but not with the one person who mattered most. He asked to see her that same afternoon. His assistant told her the company wanted to speak to her privately. She arrived nervous, holding her hands together. She didn't know why she was called. She had never even talked to him before that strange day in the cafeteria. When she walked into the small meeting room, she saw the billionaire sitting at the table. He wasn't in his usual expensive suit this time. He looked tired, almost fragile. She sat down slowly, unsure what to expect. He looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing every line of her face. Then, with a voice softer than she had ever imagined, he said, "I need to tell you something." She stared at him, confused. He took a deep breath. "I know this will sound impossible, but you are my daughter." For a second, everything around her seemed to stop. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "What are you saying?" she whispered, her hands shaking slightly. "I lost my daughter 10 years ago," he said, his eyes filling with tears he had held for years. "You were taken. I spent everything I had searching. I never gave up, and now, I found you." She sat frozen. Her life had always been a long line of unanswered questions. She never knew why she didn't have parents. She never knew why there was no one waiting for her. And now this man, this powerful man, was telling her she belonged to him. "I don't understand," she said softly. He gently pushed the DNA report across the table. "It's true," he whispered. Her eyes scanned the paper, though she barely understood the numbers. But she could feel the weight in his voice. She saw the way his hands trembled. She saw the way his eyes shined with something real. It didn't look like a lie. Her throat felt dry. For years she had believed she was alone in this world, and now in a single afternoon she found out she wasn't. She didn't know how to react. She didn't stand up and hug him. She didn't cry on his shoulder. She just sat there trying to breathe. He leaned forward, his voice breaking. "I failed you once. I will not fail you again." She looked into his eyes. Behind the image of a rich, strong man, she saw something else. She saw a father who had been broken for a long time. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But something inside her had changed. Something that had been quiet all her life now had a name. She had a father. She had a past, and her life would never be the same again. Mr. Daniels didn't sleep that night. The truth he had waited to find for so many years was finally in front of him. But it wasn't easy. Finding her was not the end. It was only the beginning. His daughter wasn't the little child he had lost. She was now a young woman who had grown up in a hard world, without knowing who she truly was. He knew that no amount of money or power could erase those years. He could not bring back the birthdays he missed, the hugs he never gave, or the comfort she never had. The next morning he walked through the garden behind his house, feeling the cool air touch his face. He kept seeing her face in his mind, her shocked eyes, her silent expression. He remembered how she had just sat there, confused and unsure. She didn't run into his arms. She didn't cry out, "Dad," and deep inside he understood why. She had every reason to hesitate. Later that afternoon, he met with the investigator again. "I need everything," he said. "I want to know how this happened." The man handed him a folder. Mr. Daniels opened it with trembling fingers. What he saw inside made his whole body freeze. Years ago, when his daughter disappeared, the police believed it was a random kidnapping, but the truth was far worse. The file showed that a trusted house employee, someone who had worked in his home, had secretly taken the child. It was part of an illegal network that moved children and created false papers. That person had been paid by someone, and the baby was placed in the foster system under a different identity. The case was quietly buried, lost under layers of lies and mistakes. He trusted people in his own home, and they were the ones who took her away. He dropped the file on the table and covered his face with his hands. The guilt he had carried for years suddenly became heavier. If only he had noticed. If only he had listened more carefully back then. He thought of his wife, who passed away a few years after their daughter vanished, carrying heartbreak that never healed. He thought of the nights he sat alone, staring at her photo. Now the truth was clear. The system failed. People he trusted failed. But most of all, he felt he failed. Meanwhile, the young woman sat alone in her small apartment. Her hands were still holding the copy of the DNA paper he had given her. She stared at it over and over again. It didn't feel real. She had always lived with the thought that she was unwanted, left behind as a child. She never imagined her father was alive, searching for her all these years. She didn't know how to feel. Should she be happy? Should she be angry? Should she trust him? She walked to the small mirror on the wall and touched the birthmark under her chin. She used to wonder where she got it from. Now she knew. The next day he called her again. She didn't answer at first, but something inside her told her to go. She walked into his big house for the first time. Everything looked expensive, clean, and quiet. It felt like another world compared to the life she knew. He came down the stairs slowly. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just a simple sweater. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a tired father. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. She sat down on the couch, her hands folded tightly. "Why didn't anyone find me before?" she asked. He took a deep breath. "Because people lied," he said. "Someone I trusted took you. I didn't know. I blamed myself every single day. I never stopped searching. Not for a single day." Her eyes softened, but she didn't say anything. She listened. "I missed everything," he said in a low voice. "Your first day at school. Your birthdays. Every small moment that mattered. I can never get that time back. But I want to be honest with you. I don't want to hide anything anymore." His voice broke when he added, "I'm sorry." The word hung in the air between them. It wasn't the kind of sorry that came easily. It was a heavy one, born from years of pain and guilt. She didn't respond right away. She had spent her whole life fighting to survive, working jobs no one noticed, moving from house to house, and now this man was offering her something she never had. A past, a family, a place where she belonged. But trust wasn't something she could give in a second. He gently opened a small box on the table. Inside was a tiny yellow hairpin. "You used to wear this the day you disappeared," he said softly. "I kept it all these years." She stared at the hairpin. Something warm touched her chest. She didn't even remember it, but seeing it made her heart feel strange. He didn't push her to forgive him. He didn't ask her to stay. He just sat with her quietly, letting the silence speak for itself. In the weeks that followed, things didn't magically become perfect. But something began to change slowly. They started meeting at a small cafe instead of his big house. They talked about simple things first. Her favorite food, the places she grew up, the things she liked to do. He told her about her mother, about their house, about the day she was born. Each meeting felt like a small bridge being built between two distant worlds. She began to see that behind the image of a rich and powerful man was someone who had lived with pain just like hers. And he began to see that behind the quiet young woman was the strength of someone who had survived the world alone. One evening, as they sat outside the cafe watching the sunset, she finally whispered, "I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I can call you Dad right now." He smiled gently. "That's okay. I'll wait as long as it takes." For the first time, she smiled back. It wasn't big, but it was real. The truth had broken him, but that same truth was slowly building something new. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. But it was honest. In the months ahead, the world would see headlines about a billionaire reuniting with his long-lost daughter. But behind those headlines was a quiet story of two hearts trying to heal, one learning to forgive and the other learning to love again. For Mr. Daniels, the search had ended. For her, a new beginning had started, and even though the past could not be changed, the future still had space for hope.